welcome to the most excellent 80s movies podcast. Podcast is what brings us together today. Podcast, that bwessed awangement, where a filmmaker and a comedian adventure through the 80s movies we love and love to hate. This is episode 29, possibly episode 30, we'll see. The Princess Bride, a movie selection from 1987.
Grandfather's here.
Can't you tell me I'm sick? He'll pinch my cheek. I hate that.
Maybe he won't.
Hey, how was the sickie? Huh? I brought you a special present.
What is it?
It was the book my father used to read to me when I was sick, and I used to read it to your father. And today, I'm going to read it to you.
It was a time when life didn't seem so complicated.
Marriage is what brings us together today.
What?
What?
I'm killing myself once we reach the honeymoon suite.
Wouldn't that be nice?
A courtly age of gentle conversation.
I will always come for you.
But how can you be sure?
This is true love.
Oh, no. Is this a kissing book?
No. Actually, there was a lot of treachery, peril, and revenge.
Prepare to die.
Never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line.
There were affairs of state.
But I've got my country's 500th anniversary to plan, my wedding to arrange, my wife to murder, and Gilda to frame for it. I'm swamped.
And affairs of the heart.
My Wesley will always come for me.
Your Wesley is dead.
I've seen worse.
Bye, boys. Have fun storming the castle.
It's more than turning. What's the difference? We've got him.
Think it'll work?
It would take a miracle.
Bye-bye.
It's a story of love. A tale of adventure. It's as real as the feelings you feel.
Kissing again.
Someday you may not mind so much.
The Princess Bride. Not just your basic, average, everyday, ordinary, run-of-the-mill, ho-hum fairy tale.
That saxophone was a poor choice.
Why is there a saxophone music?
That trailer, we talked about, like, there's some movies that just don't get the movie yet. You know, it's like, like in terms of, like, you know, and it's obviously it's 2020 hindsight. Like, it's now this big thing, you know, The Princess Bride.
But it wasn't. It didn't do well.
Thanks to that goddamn trailer.
Exactly. Nobody knew what it was. Is it a romantic comedy? Is it an action movie? Is it a fantasy movie? What is it? Mm-hmm. Why is there what is Fred Savage doing here with Columbo?
Playing the saxophone. So this is part of our 1-year anniversary.
Yes.
We picked, we decided to do a anniversary special. And so we each picked our favorite movie of the 80s as kind of celebrating our survival to 1 year.
That's right.
And so this one is yours.
This is mine. I'm Chrissy Lenz, comedian, and with me as always is
Nathan Blackwell, filmmaker, raconteur.
And yeah, this is very exciting. I could like just sit down. I could pull a Peter Falk and just tell you this movie if you were sick. In my day, television was called me telling you this movie. I know the whole thing.
This became, it's like, because I wasn't aware that it bombed or anything like that. You're not aware of those things as a kid. I just knew that it was the teacher's go-to to put on as like summer vacation or some other thing. Whenever they like, well, we don't need to have class. Let's show a movie. And so like in the cafeteria, like I'm like, no joke. I think I saw it 2 or 3 times just at school before we ever rented it or saw it on TV.
You were so lucky.
And so it became like a staple of these movies that you'd see at school, like literally, like the whole cafeteria would be filled with kids, and it's like, we got a half day, we're gonna put on a movie. So it was this or like Never Ending Story, but usually 2 out of 3 times it was this.
Yeah. Like, did they ever give you a choice? Like, raise your hand if you want Never
No,
Ending
I don't
Story?
think so.
Nice.
No.
So here's what we're going to do. You're going to walk us through the movie.
Right.
And I'm going to sidetrack us as often as possible.
You're going to slather us with enthusiasm
Yes.
as we go. So this is our second Rob Reiner movie.
It is.
The first one being This Is Spinal Tap. At first blush, it's hard to see the connection in terms of like style and things like that. But Roger Ebert put it well to where he said like the connective tissue between, and when he saw Princess Bride, he loved it. He said the connective tissue was both of them were absolutely embracing whatever format they were choosing. You know, it wasn't kind of like this is the Rob Reiner style. It's like this is so a documentary, mockumentary, and this is so like a fairy tale.
Yeah, definitely. But I think the Rob Reiner touch, though, is that the sincerity and the variation of tone, which is like I think part of what draws me to this movie is that like it's not all, even though they're totally playing it 100% serious, straight, earnest, sincere the whole way through, there's those little moments where the tone just shifts to being like, here are these characters, here are these people, and they're just having a casual moment together, you know.
The comedy is also very meta in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. You know, it's very there's a slight wink to the audience as the characters are kind of like, you know, speaking out of time of what would be in a fairy tale. So this movie is from writer William Goldman.
Oh.
This was R.I.P.
I know, it's so good.
Famous screenwriter William Goldman. This was his beloved child. This was the one thing that mattered of all the stuff he made. This was the one. This was his baby, and so I think he wrote it in 1971.
The book?
Yeah, the book.
And the book is so brilliant and so different from the movie.
I haven't read it.
Oh, it's so good.
Is there no Fred Savage?
Well,
Or is
no, but it is very, you step outside of the book. So S. Morgenstern, who writes the book, is retelling the book kind of, and he's like, this is the story of the Princess Bride, and some people will tell you this, and some people will tell you this, but I'm going to tell you this. And it has this really great, like, repeating, which only comes up a little bit in the movie at the very end, where they say, you know, in the history of the kiss, there have been this many kisses.
5 rated as the most passionate. And
So that's all throughout the book.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and you get just so much more detail about things, which I will save as we go on. It's totally worth a read.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we start off with Fred Savage. He's sick for the day, and then his grandpa shows up. I remember as a kid, like, focusing on like what are his toys, like the video, like the baseball video game he's playing. It's like, I know that game.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know that He-Man toy in the background. It's like those connections of that the kids latch on to, and I still remember. It's like, oh my God, there's Battle Cat.
And there's also like the hat that Rob Reiner wears in Spinal Tap is sitting on the bedpost.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's noticeable. It's in there.
So basically, Fred Savage is begrudgingly going along with this because he's forced. He's not into it. Especially because the story starts off almost kind of like a Harlequin novel. You know, it's like, come, stable boy, clean up my
The beautiful farm boy and the most beautiful buttercup, and yeah, my day television was called books. Like he's.
Yeah, so Peter Falk is reading, Columbo is reading Fred Savage this book, and it starts off with Buttercup just treating Wesley like a piece of shit.
Yep.
See, it's like the gender reversal where the guy is treating the woman like crap, and he falls in love, or she falls in love with him.
He's the Cinderella of this story.
Exactly.
And they are both so goddamn beautiful. They're just so beautiful. I love them both. And yes, the beginning is very romance.
Yeah, so and then it's supposed to, there's not a lot of humor. It's just all kind of like hot, steamy, you know, haylofts and
Farm
like
boy, fetch me that pitcher.
right. And so it hasn't quite revealed like its humor yet. And so.
And doesn't he say, like, isn't it at the very beginning where he says, like, she realized that when he said, as you wish, what he meant was, I love you. Isn't that great? And the kid's like, oh my God, I don't believe this.
Yeah. So I there's one point in the story where everything could have, like, where there's sometimes that leap of faith where if it didn't happen, the whole plot wouldn't have happened. Mm-hmm. So Wesley, the reason Wesley leaves her is because he had no money for marriage.
Right.
And if he never left,
you need money for marriage.
They would have been pretty happy.
Yeah.
Like if they had just had, oh, you know what, let's have a backyard wedding.
Well, they talk about in the book, like, if you are interested, the book is different enough from the movie that you get totally different things out of both of them, which in this case I think is good. Sometimes I really complain about it. But in the book, they describe her situation more with, like, her parents and, like, why he needs to have money so that they can sort of run away together. Because her parents want to give her to Humperdinck.
Gotcha.
Right.
And so it's very much just kind of like, we touch on it and then we're moving straight away. Mm-hmm. He's going to leave her and to seek his fortune.
But not before he lets her know.
Yeah.
That he will always come for her.
So I almost feel like he secretly needed to get his pirate on before he settles down.
No.
Like he needed to.
I just got a few wild oats to sow, babe. I'll be back.
I promise. So that was one of, like, the first meta fairy tale moments, is like, because this is true love. Do you think something like this happens every day? You know, it's, again, kind of winking, and it's a very contemporary kind of, you know, line. Then we cut 5 years later, and he's obviously disappeared, believed to be dead, killed by the dread pirate Roberts.
Yes.
And
Buttercup just simply says she will never love again.
Nope. It's true.
Just like in Twilight.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing.
So so she is now being betrothal to Humperdinck, the prince of the land.
Yeah, and he basically, like, I think the line in the movie The Princess Bride is like, though the law of the land gave him the right to choose his bride, like he just went, you, I'll have you. They do describe that a bit more. And like he, like, literally is like, no, I pick you. Because she's, like, the third most beautiful woman in the entire world or something like that.
Right. Definitely in the top 5.
Yeah, yes. And, like, I love that part so much where they're cutting to the future and she's walking out, my people, and she gets to meet everybody in her princess outfit. Ugh. So good. The sleeves and the boots, everything. I love it so much.
But, so she is supposed to marry the prince, but she's not in love with him. Unbeknownst to her, that there's basically a plot to kidnap her, which will be revealed further on as we go. But then it's the arrival of basically the comedy of the movie.
Yes.
You know? And so we've got now our 3 kind of like thieves / villains or whatever, at least initially. We have Vizzini. Okay. So we've got Vizzini,
played by Wallace Shawn,
who's amazing. Fezzik, of course, Andre the Giant,
Yes.
and then Inigo Montoya, of
Mandy
course, Mandy
Patinkin.
Patinkin.
Oh.
So 3 classic, amazing characters.
Who couldn't be more different one to another.
And then we meet them. They kidnap her. And
can I interject some fun facts? Like,
yes,
is this a
go
good
for
time
it.
for that? Okay. So when they originally were trying to make this movie in the late 70s, Arnold Schwarzenegger really wanted to play Fezzik the Giant, and they were like, maybe, I don't know. We really want to try and get Andre the Giant, but at that time, Andre the Giant was so famous that he, was untouchable or whatever. And then by the time they got it made in the 80s, Arnold Schwarzenegger was untouchable and, like, just couldn't be got. He was a huge star, and Andre the Giant was kind of like at the end of his career.
Physically, a lot of the stuff that he was doing was really taking a toll. Like, he is a massive dude.
Yes, and he was like ill. And there's Carrie Elwes has written a book. It's really good. It's called As You Wish, and I have read it, and I went to a reading of it where he did like a Q&A and stuff.
Okay.
And it's all stories of the making of The Princess Bride, and so many of them are about Andre the Giant and how he would just drink like 8 bottles of wine.
Oh, yeah. It was all self-medication because he was always in so much pain.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's an interesting choice for this role. It's like he's a Frenchman who doesn't speak the best English, and it's hard to understand what he's saying, but yet he still conveys so much warmth.
Yes. You love him, even though, like, for years, I didn't know what half of his dialogue was.
Oh, yeah.
And Rob Reiner actually recorded the dialogue, and Andre the Giant would just listen to it, and that's how he learned it. And so, but some of it is still just like, you can't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The accent. But it's worth it, because he's just so lovable.
And immediately, so we meet these three villains, but there's a line drawn to where when they find out that they're supposed to kill her, that Andre and Mandy, or Fezzik and Inigo, aren't really comfortable with that. And then Vizzini is like, no, this is what we're doing. It's like, I've got no problem with this, you know. So the line is kind of drawn between, like, the sympathetic villains and, like, the kind of the real straight up villain, even though he's kind of a weenie, you know.
He is. He's like a little bully who can't do anything himself, so he's just gonna bully these other two.
Yeah, and the other two are actually, like, deeply skilled and great at what they do. But they've got a conscience, and they've
got low self-esteem, though. Like, the Fezzik is just pulling them up, you know, and Wesley is, the Dread Pirate Roberts is hot on their heels. And we totally skipped the eels, but I guess we can't do every minute.
We're getting to the eels.
And he's like, well, I'm carrying 3 people, and he's just one guy by himself. And Lucini's like, I can't accept excuses. I'm just going to have to find another giant.
Right. He's staring right at him as he's lifting them over the cliffs of insanity. They're like 300 feet up. It's like, I'm just going to have to find another giant. So this kind of starts off, especially as like a young lad. And this is also where Fred Savage gets hooked in. Like, now we begin like a sequence. It's like one of the strongest sequences in the movie, where basically we've got the shrieking eels, the cliffs of insanity, the sword fight, the wrestling, the iocane powder matches of wits, and like the fire swamp.
And those are the best parts.
Yeah, it's like all these great, like 6 or 7 like tent pole scenes right after another. That as a kid, that's the section I watched the most, is that section there.
Yes, and like even with all the, like, when you start with the shrieking eels and they pause and come back to Fred Savage, and then when they go back to Vizzini, you hear Peter Falk's voice. Those are the shrieking eels.
That's great.
Grandpa, you read that part. I love that little fourth wall break, even though it's not really that, is it?
And then people are talking with his voice.
And then the sword fight is just so beautifully done.
The sword fight, which I think has been called, the chatty duelists. It's like one of the best sword fights in movie history. So it's the whole thing is choreographed by Bob Anderson, who actually did like sword fighting with Errol Flynn, and he was the sword choreographer in like the Lord of the Rings movies, and so he's like the top dog. But just like, that is the way to do an action sequence. As a filmmaker, this sword fight is the way to do an action sequence, because you've got these beats. It's not just endless fighting. You have these beats and developments as they're going along. They're fighting. They establish their characters early on. Like Inigo, he
gives you the best exposition.
They're like laying around,
you don't have
gathering
to have
their
6
breath,
fingers,
and he's telling him his whole life story. And you get the feeling like he does this to every dude. He's just a chatty Cathy about this kind of stuff, and always talking about his personal business. Well, I got to kill you. Sorry about this.
Because he's on a quest to find the 6-fingered man. So like, he figures the best way to do it is just network.
Yeah,
like
that's exactly what it is, and it comes off like that. Like, this is just what he does. Like, he's just chatting him up.
Yeah.
But yeah, these different beats and these, it's like the reveals that he's not left-handed, the reveal that he's not left-handed,
I'm
and
not
then
left-handed either.
There's all these different beats and developments that allow us to kind of catch our breath, change the action, have a development, watch more, it gets accelerated, and then there's a surprise. Like, this is the way to do an action scene.
And I also think like I use all of those scenes as examples when I teach improv, because if you see a lot of improv, sometimes two people will just stand on stage and look at each other and have a conversation, and it's like their words are all that they're using. We call those talking head scenes, and they're a real bummer. So I like to use this whole sequence in The Princess Bride as like a key example of how you can be still putting that wonderful, beautiful information out there and telling us what we need to know about your story, your plot, and developing your character and all of this stuff. Everything we learn in the Fire Swamp is so brilliant. But they're not just standing still and talking to each other. They're sword fighting, or they're wrestling. Like when Fezzik and Dread Pirate Roberts are wrestling, they're still like, well, here's why I think I'm having trouble. He's like swatting at him and smashing him into rocks, and they're still...
I'm not used to fighting one-on-one.
Yeah. And then in the Fire Swamp, like, they're hopping around and jumping out of the way of the flame spurts, and he's explaining all this to her. So I use it as a teaching tool of, like, well, here's how you move through space and do something interesting while you're still delivering all the important words.
Also during the sword fight is one of my favorite lines in the movie, and it's just like almost like a small throwaway line that you could just drive right over. But it's like when he's trying to explain, it's like Inigo is like asking, Dread Pirate Roberts, who's actually Wesley, he's like, how did you learn how to do this? And he's not going to tell him, and he says, get used to disappointment. And he just says, okay. Get used to disappointment.
Okay. One of my favorite lines is in that part too, where Humperdinck is catching up to them, and he's like explaining how the duel went, and he says, if she's alive, or was an hour ago, if she's not, if she's dead when I find her, I shall be very put out. It's so funny, and he delivers it so seriously.
Yeah, and
that's so funny.
That's a great moment also, because it reveals that he's not just like a fancy, shirt and a haircut. Like he's got an ability. He's like this expert tracker and hunter. That there's some degree of like cunningness to him, you know. But yeah, and then those other great moments where he's fighting Andre the Giant, and it's like Vizzini is like, kill him your way. What is my way? Just wait till he comes around the side and bash his head with a rock. It's like, oh, my way is not very sportsmanlike. And then again, it just makes us sympathize with that character and like him, even though his task is to kill the mystery man who's our hero,
He just looks so damn good in a mask and a little hat, like,
and a tiny mustache.
You have to be very special. It's the bottom face acting, which we got so much of in the 80s. There was so much acting with just your bottom face.
Bottom face, yeah.
You got RoboCop, you got Wesley, you got Michael Keaton's Batman. Like, what do we have against people's noses and eyes? So I don't know if I've skipped ahead to this part, but at the moment where they're sitting on top, before they get to the Fire Swamp, and they're sitting on top of the hill before they tumble down, as you wish, they tumble away. Cary Elwes broke his foot because he was riding Andre the Giant's ATV and like crushed his foot as they're there filming that scene. And they're all like, oh my God, Cary, what did you do? And he's like, I'm fine. So he did that whole scene with a broken foot. Ugh. And if you know, and then you watch, you can see that like he sits down in this really weird way, which maybe just seems like a suave pirate man sitting down, but it's because he can't put any weight on his foot because it's broken.
Oh man!
Fun fact.
There's when they're going up the cliffs of insanity. Andre is pulling up 3 people, that giant rope up the thing. For sure in that long shot, it's just a normal sized dude carrying 3 like tiny mannequins, dolls up, going up there.
3 tiny mannequins.
Yeah, this was not. It's such a fantastic. We see so many fantastic scenes and locations and things like that, but
yeah, the locations are great.
Yeah,
and the mood is terrific, and the costumes are brilliant.
But it wasn't like a hugely budgeted movie, Like there's some things you can kind of see the edges in, like when you see like the long shots of of like the ships sailing. I was like, those are really miniature. Those are very tiny ships.
Well, and no one at that time was a star. Like, probably the biggest star in the movie is Billy Crystal.
Who's completely covered up in makeup.
Yeah.
And
But
they leaned heavily on in the trailer.
yes. And, but, like, these weren't huge stars. Like,
yeah.
Robin Wright was unknown, and Carrie Elwes had only been in, like, one other movie, and I think Fred Savage might have even been a bigger star than everyone else at that point. So, but as soon as we get out of the fire swamp, that's when we meet Christopher Guest.
Oh, so good.
The six-fingered man.
The carryover from This Is Spinal Tap.
Yes. He was playing an evil, like, in my heart and mind, Christopher Guest is the evil Count Rogan. And that's who he was to me until I started, like, seeing him in comedies and just being like, oh, that was the difference.
The acting.
This is, yeah.
We skipped also the rodents of unusual size.
RUSs? I don't think they exist.
Yeah, and for the longest time I thought it's like, oh, the rodents of unusual size, and then she knows like the proper name for it, the ROSs. But that's an acronym. She's pronouncing the acronym of rodents of unusual sizes, the ROUSs.
Yes, correct. And it was an actual little person in that.
Oh yeah, which
suit.
you could 100% see.
And he was like shit-faced the whole time. They're just like, how can you drink that much? And he's like, I'm fine. And like, I think he dislocated his shoulder or something weird.
Right. Well, that's why they threw him on the fire.
Yep.
But yeah, so at this point now, like Fred Savage's character is like, now that it's like, again, he's like 100% in at this point. Like,
Yep.
He is totally in. So they finally get out of the fire swamps, so it's been revealed that it's actually Wesley when she like threw him down.
Before they get into the fire swamp. So they have all the time in the fire swamp, but he tells the story of how the Dread Pirate Roberts is just a name that's passed down from person to person.
I like, yeah. So they do that great stunt where they gets thrown down that steep hill. I almost like the idea that is a dude who just specializes in those kind of falls. Like he and his wife, they just do those kinds of falls because it looked like a totally different person than any other stuntmen. But so she's recaptured, and she basically gives up because she sees like on the outer perimeter all these crossbowmen ready to shoot them down.
They set up the fire swamp as being this like impossible barrier, and then like they just went around. You could just go around.
Did they have horses?
Yeah. Anyway, yes, they are encountered.
Nobody's perfect. So yeah, they get through the fire swamp. They're captured. She gives him up because she sees that they're all going to get shot to death.
Well, you promised not to hurt him. And everyone's like, what was that?
Yeah. Wink, wink. Okay, so then Wesley knows exactly what's going to happen to him. It's like
we are men of action. Lies do not become us.
Which is great. And so he's actually put in the pit of despair.
The pit of despair.
Which is awesome. So this is, again, another great set piece. The whole idea that there's this mechanism, there's this machine. So we realize that the six-fingered man, who we have already heard about from the Spaniard, he is kind of a scientist.
Yeah, he dabbles.
He dabbles. Yeah, and so the another great gag, especially like for kids or whatever, it's like the albino. You're in the pit of despair.
Yes. And he's curing him so that he can be healed before he's broken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, for scientific purposes.
Of course.
Yeah. So he's got this machine that drains you of life, and he's recording all this information. And
it is for posterity.
Remember, this is for posterity.
Be honest. Yes.
Which is another great kind of twist, and it's, again, very contemporary and kind of meta. So these characters, even though the setting is fairy, I'm not going to say fantasy, it's fairy tale.
Yeah.
It's very fairy tale, but the characters are very contemporary and modern.
They're real, yeah. They're 3-dimensional. Like you get that part with the Humperdinck and Rugen outside the pit of despair, and he's like, "Do you want to come in? You want to see what I'm doing in there?" And he's like, "I love to watch you work, but I'm just swamped." It's like, well, you got to take care of yourself. You need to rest, and it's like,
if you don't have your health, you don't have anything.
yeah. So
just
like,
two bros.
They're 3-dimensional. You know?
Yeah, it's not even like Baron and Prince. It's like Tyrone. I'd love to, but.
Yeah, and you can picture them just like having an ale at the end of the day. How was your day? Ugh, oy, you would not believe. So they have those moments of being real, of stepping outside of their bravado. And,
it's a comic surprise, yeah.
Exactly.
And again, it humanizes them. You don't need to necessarily always humanize everyone, but they do, and it makes them much more richer experience.
Yes. And it's just hilarious.
Yeah, it is the hilarity. So the wedding is going off, as planned. He promises to send his 4 fastest ships to because she's like, no, I can't. She has like this a dream sequence, and we think that she's going to marry Humperdinck. Now Fred Savage is like, WTF? No, she can't marry him. What's going on?
Yeah, he gets very upset.
He's just like, cool your jets at this point.
Boo!
Boo! The queen of putrescence.
Boo! I love that part so much. Her dress is so beautiful.
So he promises to do this, and she pronounces her love for him. They initiate the brute squad to clean out the thieves' forest.
Which, like, that part always confused me, because Humperdinck has pretty much laid out at this point that he hired Vizzini to kidnap Buttercup.
Right, to create a national fervor, even though he's the prince and can kind of order everyone, but he wants the moral support of.
Yes, he wants to go to war with Gilder, the city across the sea.
Right.
And then he's like, oh, I thought that was a great plan, but this plan's even better. She's going to be murdered on our wedding night. Won't that be tragic? Like, and he's
super jazzed about it.
He tells his captain in command, form a brute squad and empty the thieves' forest. Because my bride cannot be murdered. But he's going to murder, like,
right.
Is that just like forensic countermeasures? What is the...
No, I feel like it's like he's planting the seed that her life is in threat. So the chief enforcer, they've got this great comedic bit when he comes into his office, and the chief enforcer leans his hands on his royal armrest. There's a slight look, takes his hands off, and then the prince puts his hands on. It's just like great comedic business there.
Yes.
The chief enforcer is not privy to the murder plot. And so he wants everyone to know that we got to be on guard, that in case the princess is going to be murdered. So basically, wide sweeping security, event, and then also like double the amount of people at the front. We've got to show we've done everything to prevent this. And then in his mind, then she's killed, and everyone freaks out.
And
so
maybe
just
blames
he's laying,
that captain of the guard.
No, I think it's just laying the track so that everyone's on the same story. So if she's killed, then because he's already planting the seed that it's Gilder.
She's in danger.
Rather than her just like spontaneously dying and saying, "Oh, it was our enemy."
I had just always had a problem with that because, like, I think any logical person would be like, okay, but you had all the security out the front and you emptied the thieves' forests, and then the killer would have had to be someone who was already in the castle, so it's probably one of you. Maybe people in those days did not read as much true crime.
Well, if he never left to pursue his fortune,
yes,
for marriage,
also true. So so they empty the thieves' forest.
Yeah, and then there's no sign of him from Princess Buttercup. She decides that she will not marry, that she's totally still into Wesley. She finds out that he did not send his 4 fastest ships.
And she doesn't care because Wesley will come for her anyway.
And then he's pissed off, and she insults him to his face. And so he goes to the pit of despair, cranks up the device because it was just he cranked it all the way up to 50 years.
Yeah.
Even Christopher Guest is like,
No,
no.
50, yeah.
Yeah, and then basically kills Wesley.
Yep.
Or at least mostly dead.
He's dead.
And then Fezzik and Inigo, they've got their own kind of bro time. They meet up again. They both rally each other's morale. They decide to look for Wesley to help him initiate his revenge.
And they know at this point that the six-fingered man is Count Rugen.
How do they know?
Fezzik knows somehow. Fezzik tells him the story of everything that happened afterwards. Because I guess what happened was that, like, Inigo, once
was
he
in a
woke
newsletter.
up, like,
Yeah.
he slunked off to get his drank on or whatever because he failed. Vizzini told him to go back to the beginning. So, and then Fezzik's like, no, I've been listening. He's on the Brute Squad. He's got it all figured out. Like, so he tells him about Count Rugen. So now,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Inigo
At this point,
knows.
we've got the kind of narrative cheat. It's actually Peter Falk kind of summing things up, and then they did this and skipping over a lot of that stuff. And so, so his whole plan is to storm the castle for revenge. But what Wesley actually needs to do is storm the castle to get his true love. But
we got to talk about Miracle Max.
I know. So we're getting there. But Wesley's dead, and so they're Inigo.
And Fred Savage is like, he can't be dead. You read that wrong.
Right, but Inigo, he's looking for guidance from his father. Putting his sword up to the lens flare, and then says, "Please guide my sword," and it just goes into a tree. But it's the notch that opens the pit of despair, and they rescue them. And so they procure Wesley, and he's dead. But they go to Miracle Max to revive him, to resurrect him. And this is where we meet Billy Crystal
And Carol Kane.
And
Which I think that sequence is probably the most famous sequence from the movie. Maybe like people most quoted, most remembered. I'm not a witch, I'm your wife. Like that whole shenanigans. Have fun storming the castle. Like that's, I think, the part most people remember.
Yeah, it's the most showy. It's not one that I wouldn't put it in my top 5 scenes or moments personally, but it's definitely a lot of fun. And basically Billy Crystal is just chewing the scenery.
Yep, and they basically, the story goes that Rob Reiner couldn't be on set because it was just too hilarious. He couldn't not, be laughing. And Mandy Patinkin said that the only time he got injured on set was when he cracked his rib from trying so hard not to laugh at Billy Crystal.
Sounds like good sort of press release blurbs.
Yes. Yeah, and it's give Carol Kane some credit too. She's the funny one. Happening. She's so memorable in that scene. And I love her so much.
But this is where we kind of return to the theme of true love. This is one of the points where we're really kind of driving home to the whole idea that the theme is about true love. Two people who have found true love, who've been separated, must be together again and finally reunited for true love.
Yes.
But yeah, so he does resurrect. They resurrect Wesley, and now he's super floppy.
He's been mostly dead all day.
Yeah.
And that scene
which
where they're
is
on the
a
wall
great device
is so
because
great.
he's kind of like the Jedi Knight. He's great at everything. He can beat everyone. So what's the challenge? It's we got to give Luke Skywalker some problem because otherwise he's just going to kill everyone and then the story's over.
He'll just pop in, grab Buttercup, kill Rugen, pop out.
Right.
So he can't move his arms and legs, and basically Fezzik has to carry him.
Yeah, like a rag doll.
Yeah. But I love the part where they're sitting on the wall planning, and he's like, "Who are you? I'll fight you both apart. I'll beat you both together." Then
I feel like this is where we see real Wesley.
Yes.
When he doesn't have a girl to impress, he's not putting on a persona for a sword fight. He's kind of a bit of a dick manager. It's what are our assets? Where are our liabilities? Who are you? I don't even know you.
If only we had a wheelbarrow, that would be. Oh, we do have a wheelbarrow. Why didn't you say something?
Why did you list that in our list of assets?
And then he's like, he's a little head wiggle supposed to make me happy.
It's kind of a dick.
Yeah. But a charming, super intelligent dick who's been mostly dead all day. Tell me you're not cranky when someone wakes you up from a nap.
Fair point.
Yeah.
I'm cranky with a whole lot less.
But I just love that he's like already worked through the whole plan, and he's like, oh, well, I can see a plan working if we had this and this. And they're like, oh, we can get that. And he's like, great, here's what we're going to do then.
Yeah, so they light Fezzik on fire. Mm-hmm.
He pretends to be the giant dread pirate robbers. That part is one of the hardest parts to understand.
Oh, yeah, for sure, because you can't read his lips because they're covered in fire.
The dread pirate robbers is here for your soul.
Yeah, it's like... And then it's intercut with one of the most classic scenes is like marriage. So you're like intercutting the most unintelligible people. Mm-hmm. You're not able to understand what anyone's saying for like a good 2.5 minutes.
And like Buttercup goes from being like in the marriage scene, she's so confident, like the whole day she's so confident. I do not marry today. Why is there fear behind your eyes? And it's like then all of a sudden the just skip to the end, and she's like, oh. Damn. And she's gonna kill herself.
Yeah. So she is now, both of them, both Wesley and Buttercup, are pushed to their furthest point at this moment in the story. So he's unable to be the dashing hero. You know, he's just a rag doll, and she is basically resigned to Juliet herself. You know.
She's going to go full Juliet.
She's gonna blow herself away.
Yes. With a knife.
With a knife.
So then once we get into the castle, we're switching back and forth between Buttercup and Inigo, who has...
Oh, yeah. So this is where it gets... Yeah, and so now, like, during the moment, this is, like, our big climax. It gets, like, super serious. It gets, like, very dramatic. Mm-hmm. You know, like, anything can happen.
But with that perfect moment of comedy.
Right.
Where the drama is at...
He finally meets him.
They're in that hallway. Uh-huh. He draws his sword.
He finally... We've heard it several times before, and he finally gets to say the famous line.
Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. And
Pause.
Then Christopher Guest... runs the fuck away. Like,
which is 100% understandable because he just like cut down 10 dudes.
Yep. And then it's a chase scene, and I think Mandy Patinkin is so brilliant because he goes from that high drama of like, this is the moment, it's all been like, what the fuck? That guy just ran away. And then
Fezzik,
he's getting away from me.
Oh yeah, but it just like as soon as like Christopher Guest fulls on like throws a knife into his belly, it's like, dude, like he's done. And it gets super serious, you know.
And then he gets stabbed in both arms.
Yeah, which is great because it's again like, you know, he's coming back to life. He's kind of, you know, even the music is dun, 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 as he's like building back up, getting that heroic energy back up, you know, like, yeah, he parries each of those shots, getting stabbed in each arm. And he's just fighting through his mortal wounds, which appear to be, and we finally get like our giant like triumph.
Yep.
It's
like, stop saying that, and he's just over and over and over. It's so good.
Yeah, and that's kind of like our adventure climax of the movie. You know, is avenging his father, and yeah, it's so good. It's so well written. And then also going on is Wesley, who can't move, and then Prince Humperdinck comes in.
Well, Wesley sort of wanders away, though, because like
right.
Fezzik puts his arms
drapes him
into the arms of his suit of armor and just leaves him there.
Hangs him on a towel rack.
And then he comes back and he's gone, and Fezzik's just like, okay, like this is the same thing as when he woke up, I'm sure, from and found out Vizzini was dead and all this. It was just like, all right, well, I'm just going to wander around then and see what happens. And then,
he doesn't have a lot of natural predators, so he's very kind of lax.
Yes, exactly.
Very chill about things.
And then we cut to the great line as Buttercup is raising this beautiful, like, gilded, very elaborate, fancy dagger that you keep in a special suicide box, I guess, that they issue to princesses whose husbands are dicks. She's like, just raises it to her chest, and Wesley says from the bed, "There's a shortage of perfect breasts in the world. It would be a pity to damage yours." It's so good. But they do talk about it in the book. It's one of the running gag of, like, here's how many perfect breasts there are, and here's where Buttercup ranks on that list. And that's such a good part. And the confrontation between he and Humperdinck is so satisfying. To the pain.
Yeah, and it's kind of going dark a bit, you know? It's using mind games because Wesley can't do anything, you know? Do you want to take it from here?
Me? Oh, no. They're going to fight and whatever, and basically he just psychs him out saying, like, he's going to, you know, to the pain, which means that they're going to just slowly cut him apart piece by piece, except for his ears.
His perfect hearing.
Which he will, so that every person who weeps at the sight of him will echo in his perfect ears. And then he's like, you know, I've lacked the strength to stand, but maybe I have it after all.
Yeah, so it's all mind games and bluffs, and drops the sword, picks up his little half cape, takes a seat down, perfect, and then he kind of flops back down again because he can't actually. He used all of his strength just to stand up.
And Humperdinck, who is Chris Sarandon. He's the voice of Jack Skellington, which is meaningful to me. Anyway, he's so funny because he's like, I knew he was bluffing. I knew he was bluffing.
Which is so good.
Yeah. And then they leave him alive because, you know, whatever happens to them, they want him to live a long life with his cowardice. And then they just jump out the window and flutter away. And Inigo's going to become the Dread Pirate Roberts. Fezzik, we assume, is just going to hang out.
Yeah.
And Wesley and Buttercup have that, like, perfect, all of their kisses are in front of beautiful sunsets. And that's what all love is supposed to be like. How could you even try and kiss someone if you're not in front of a sunset? Why bother? But, of course, we cut back to Fred Savage and Peter Falk, and he's like, I'm not going to read this to you. It's a kiss.
We don't. No, it's okay. You can no, just finish it for completion reasons.
Yeah. And
so
then,
he's come full circle.
Yep.
And he's found his manhood.
The power of books, everybody. And then Peter he asks Grandpa to come back and read it to him again tomorrow. Which, by the way, he must be a really fast reader.
It's a short book.
And
then that's not really like it's not a big emotional ending. It's kind of a nice, quiet, simple ending. And so they, to kind of give us that feeling of like camaraderie and let the music, they kind of cut back to each of these characters again
in the credits.
Yeah, because really,
I love that.
Yeah, because really, like, the people that we've become attached with is not Fred Savage and Peter Falk. It's, the characters in the story. And so I almost feel like it's one of those things that
it's like a curtain
like
call.
They did an end. That they did in editing. Like that it's like, oh, we need to see these guys again. We need a curtain call. We need like the music to stir us back up. And so they cut to all of them as we see their credit names.
Yeah. And they get that, and it's good. Like, that's one of the best parts about a play is that you really get to let the people oh, here comes Fezzik. Oh my God. Like, it's so fun.
And it really doesn't work on movies that aren't very good, but do that anyway.
Yeah. Not so great.
It's an 80s thing.
Yes. And I like that. I even wrote it down. Like, the credits, it's so good. I love that they show you everybody again in a moment of them. Like, you can't hear them talking, but you see them talking. And it's so good. So do you, I obviously give this a 10.
Yeah.
10?
I'm giving this a 10 too.
Okay,
it's everything that you hope a movie is.
It is. And it's entirely watchable. Like, and I think, I can't remember who said it for the thing, but it's like if it comes on, you're sitting down and you're watching it. It's so watchable, you don't get sick of it. And I watched it the other day preparing for this. I'm seeing it on Saturday at Alamo Draft House.
Yeah.
Like, you can't get enough.
Yeah, there's, no movie is perfect, but The Princess Bride, like the two movies we picked, pat on our own back, is is I feel like they're, at least to our definition, perfect movies.
Yes.
Like even though we've pointed out a number of flaws, again, no movie is perfect, like, but they're, to what a movie is something that is made by people. Like, this is a perfect movie experience.
It is. I love it. Do you have a deep cut recommendation?
Yeah, so I do. So my deep cut recommendation is, so at the time of recording this podcast, it is not yet out, but should be out when this podcast is out. So if you want to know, there's a screenwriting podcast called Script Notes. It's probably the best screenwriting podcast out there. John August, Craig Mazin, two working professionals who've made movies, written movies you've seen. And so they're like high-end scriptwriters. It's not like the amateur scriptwriting hour. Great podcast just for scriptwriting. So they occasionally do like these deep dive episodes where they just talk about one movie, and their next one is The Princess Bride. So it should be out by the time this podcast's out. If it's not, just wait a week or two. But yeah, and then they have a limited release. I think they'll only have their most recent 25 out. But yeah, The Princess Bride is their next one.
Oh, I'm going to listen to that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. I'm going to recommend, although I do want to make another link. I used Psych in the episode Buckaroo Banzai, because my kids have been watching it, and like Carrie Elways plays a character on Psych called Pierre Despereaux, who is this like charming, roguish cat burglar art thief. And he's just so charming in it. And Chris Sarandon is in it, and everyone you love from Princess Bride also has like bit parts in Psych. But what I really want to recommend is Once Upon a Deadpool.
Really?
Have you seen it?
No, I haven't. I saw the original, but
so Once Upon a Deadpool is the PG-13 re-release of Deadpool 2. Which is framed like Princess Bride. So we start with Fred Savage, an adult Fred Savage.
Right, 40-year-old Fred Savage.
Yep, in the set from The Princess Bride.
So good.
Deadpool has kidnapped him and is reading him the story of Deadpool 2, and we do cut back to them several times during the movie.
That's so good.
And it's fairly brilliant.
That's great.
Yeah. I would say it's not as PG-13 as you hope it will be when you show it to your 8-year-old. But it's close enough.
Okay. Good to know.
Do you want to talk about, because this will be coming out soon, do you want to talk about the new Voyage Trekkers episode?
Oh, yeah. So we did a half-hour Voyage Trekkers episode. It's basically a TV pilot,
Yes.
We did an Indiegogo campaign for a feature. We didn't have enough money for a feature, so we did a half-hour episode, and it's all structured like an actual TV show. So if you're a fan of the web series, or even if you don't know about it, this is a great. If you don't know anything about it and you only want to watch one thing, this is the thing. So it's coming out. So it should be out now. It's just on on Voyage Trekkers, our YouTube channel. But it's our half-hour episode, and we're excited about releasing that on Friday, which will have already passed several weeks ago.
So it's out now. Go watch it right now. What are you doing still listening to us? Go watch it. It's got directed by Nathan and written by Nathan and Craig, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Close
so
enough.
I can re-say that if it's
right.
not.
Well, story by both of us.
Yes. And he's and everyone who's been on this podcast ever is in it, just about. Rini is Sunstrike, and Ryan Goman is
he's
the bad guy, right? Is he?
That's a spoiler. That's a
shit!
Yeah.
Well, they don't know what he looks like.
Right.
They'll be like, "Oh, I'm going to listen for the voice."
James and Logan, who brothers and podcasts.
Yes. So, go watch it. Do it right now. Voyage Trekkers, YouTube. Go to squishystudios.com. Rate, and review all of our stuff. NCT Phoenix, come see me in an improv show. We'll have a lot of fun. All right.
So our next episode. So this is continuing the 1 year anniversary. This is 1 year anniversary special. So we'll be covering my favorite 80s movie, which is Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Ba, 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 ba. All right. So thank you so much for listening. Remember to keep the most excellent 80s movie podcast motto in mind. Be excellent to each other and
As you wish.